One of the keynote addresses at the conference, the BBC's Dr Michael Mosley, discussing how television can cash in on the obsession with health and fitness. He's had a long career both in front and behind the camera, and James Manning asked him how he got started in the industry.
So I actually spent 10 years as a director, then 10 years as an executive producer, and then now it's been 10 years as a presenter.
Did you ever envisage yourself as, creating a brand, if you like, and becoming, the star of the production?
Not in the slightest, no. It was completely random. I had this idea that I wanted to do the history of medicine told through self-experimenters, and so I was pitching that for about 14 years. Eventually I got in front of the controller of BBC 4 at the time, and she said, "Who's going to present this series?" And I said, "No idea." She said, "Why don't you do it?" And that was 10 years ago, and I've been lucky and I've continued doing things since.
Now, you're a substantial a driver of revenue, I guess, for BBC worldwide. Would it be too much of a claim to say, with the departure of Clarkson, May and Hammond and Top Gear, that you're sort of moved up the ladder a little?
I imagine it must have created a gap. To be honest, I have absolutely not a clue what I am worth to Worldwide at all. But I do. The relationship is a very much sort of mutual one, because Worldwide make my films possible. They put the money into it. They make it possible for them to be distributed around the world. So it's a very mutually beneficial arrangement.
And do you enjoy sort of visiting the broadcasters and consumers of your content outside of the UK?
Absolutely love it. Really, really interesting. You get a completely different perspective on things, and you also learn a lot coming to conferences like this. You find out what other people are doing, and that is incredibly energising. Because the risk is, obviously, if you stay at home, you just get sort of domestic worries. And it is really, really thrilling, I have to say. People come and talk about your programmes. You also see a lot of other programmes, and it produces a lot of energy, a lot of buzz.
We enjoy your content mainly on BBC Knowledge in Australia and also SBS on free-to-air. What are the particular programs that really resonate globally with audiences? I
think that certainly one of the programs I did, which was Eat Fast, Live Longer, which was Horizon, that led to the 5-2 diet. The Fast Diet was a book I wrote, so that as a single program really resonated. But I do quite a lot of, I also do a series called Trust Me, I'm a Doctor, which is shown here, has been sold to PBS and is also popular in Scandinavian countries. I'm very popular in Sweden. I was actually surprised. I was in the loo yesterday here, and somebody came up to me and said, "I really like your shoes." And I looked down at my feet, and he was saying, "Your shoes." I go, "I really like your shoes." It's really good fun. New Zealand as well, I was in recently, and I was surprised to discover a lot of people watch BBC Knowledge there, and therefore they're very aware of what I do. But I think people like the fact that I embrace it very wholeheartedly. I do the experiments on myself. I throw myself into it with a great deal of enthusiasm.
No, I guess that stretches out the production time for some of these projects, because we sit down and consume it in an hour or something, but you must spend a lot of time getting it right and, as you say, doing all the testing.
Yes, so typically a production can last anywhere from 3 months to a year, depending what they are. I do quite a lot of programs simultaneously as well, but some of the things like the Horizon I did, because it entailed my losing, I think it was around 10 kilos. That actually took about 3 months, but part of that was just being in the edit. So sometimes what they do is they build it into the edit. Edit is typically, say, 2 months. So what you do is you get to a certain point. The thing about these programs is also we almost never know how they're going to turn out. So pretty much the last day of the edit, you don't quite know what the conclusion of this film is going to be, which is a little bit hair-raising. I did one, for example, which involved swallowing tapeworm cysts. And really right till the end, I didn't know if I was infected or not. And it was only when I swallowed a pill camera, and you could actually see the little tapeworm down there. And this was actually in an Indian restaurant. I'm there. I've got my iPad out, which the pill camera is broadcasting live to there. And suddenly I go, "Hey!" And the producer is completely thrilled, because, as I said, up till that point, we could have done the whole thing and nothing happened, and that would have been something of a downer.
You mentioned the 5-2 diet before. It's 5-2's become code for people when they just say, I'm on the 5-2. Everybody seems to know what they talk about these days. But it's triggered a lot of book sales as well around the world.
It has, yes. It became an international bestseller. It became New York Times bestseller. Sold very well here. I've written another book recently called Blood Sugar Diet, which is also doing extremely well over here. So I seem to translate well. I mean, the thing I'm kind of banging on at the moment is diabetes and pre-diabetes, because those are a major health risk in places like Australia, but throughout the world, and frankly, particularly in Asia, because Asians, Indians, for whatever reason, are at much greater risk of diabetes. And it is reversible, it is treatable, and that's kind of one of the messages I want to get out there.
What should we look out for? I've seen a couple of titles, something on transplants, another one that had murder in the title.
Absolutely.
Just tell us about that.
Yeah, one of them is kind of telling the history of trying to understand murderers. It's got some fairly gruesome interviews with people, but it's allowing us an insight into the mind of a murderer, if you like. There are some wonderful academics out there who almost collect murderers. One is a British scientist who went out to California. I said, why? He said, that's where the murderers are. In large numbers. So it's trying to understand what's going on in their brains, at least in part, to see if you can kind of anticipate, prevent, and in some cases treat. So it looks at that. I've also got one on transplants. Transplants I find endlessly fascinating, particularly I've done quite a few films on people who've had hand transplants. Yeah,